What are you doing?
It appears to be a strategic withdrawal.
Nobody in Hollywood wanted to make movies about Korea. World War II had the heroism, Vietnam had the controversy, but Korea just sat there in between, ignored. Tens of thousands of Americans died in that war, and Hollywood acted like it never happened. So when a Korean War film finally showed up in 1959, you'd expect it to be some flag-waving thing about defending freedom. That's not what they made. They made something way darker. Gregory Peck signed on to play Lieutenant Joe Clemens, and this wasn't the Gregory Peck people were used to seeing. He played Clemens as a man who's figured out that the hill he's defending doesn't actually matter. The battle is just theater, the Chinese testing whether Americans will keep fighting while diplomats negotiate in a room somewhere. Men are dying, so politicians have leverage. That's a pretty crazy thing to say in 1959. War movies back then were about sacrifice meaning something. Porkchop Hill looks at sacrifice and asks, what if it doesn't? The film came out and then Korea went right back to being forgotten. For years, this was basically the only serious Hollywood movie about that war. Apocalypse Now is about the madness of Vietnam. Platoon is about the moral collapse. Hamburger Hill isn't about anything, it just shows you what happened. It's May 1969, and a U.S. Army platoon gets orders to take a hill near the Laos border. The hill is a slaughterhouse. Men keep going up and getting chewed apart. The movie follows a group of new guys joining the unit right before the assault. By the end, whoever's still alive isn't the same person anymore. There's no moment where someone stops and delivers a speech about what it all means. No voiceover explaining how this changed them. The film doesn't give you that comfort. You just watch young men get hollowed out by combat, and that's it. A bunch of the actors in this film went on to have major careers, but in 1987 they were nobodies, which works for the movie. You're not watching stars here, you're watching kids who don't know what they're walking into. There's a novel called The Killer Angels that won the Pulitzer Prize in 1975. It's about Gettysburg, the 3 days in July 1863 that broke the Confederacy's advance and basically decided the Civil War. Took almost 20 years for someone to finally adapt it. When they did, they went all in on authenticity. The movie runs over 4 hours. It doesn't rush anything. They filmed at the actual battlefield in Pennsylvania, and instead of hiring a bunch of extras to play soldiers, they reached out to Civil War reenactors. Thousands of them showed up. These are people who spend their free time getting the details right. The uniforms, the formations, the way men moved and fought in 1863. That obsession shows up on screen. They don't make movies like this anymore. There's no dramatic slow motion, no swelling music telling you this is an important moment. It trusts the history to carry the weight. Hollywood spent years trying to get Alvin York to let them make a movie about him. And for years, York kept saying no. York was a sharpshooter from Tennessee who got drafted into World War I and didn't want to go. He was religious, believed killing was wrong, spent a long time trying to figure out if he could actually pull a trigger on another human being. He went anyway. And during the final Allied push of the war, he took out a German machine gun position by himself and captured over 100 enemy soldiers. Came home as one of the most decorated Americans of the entire war. The studios came calling immediately. York turned them down. They came back, he turned them down again. This went on for years, and York wouldn't budge until finally he agreed, but with one demand. Gary Cooper had to play him. The movie came out in 1941. America hadn't entered World War II yet, but everyone knew it was coming. And here was a film about a reluctant soldier wrestling with his conscience before finding his courage. The timing was perfect. It became the biggest movie of the year. Cooper won his only competitive Oscar. They made this movie in France, at the actual locations where D-Day happened. Hundreds of actors, multiple countries' worth of cast members playing their own nationalities. Nearly 3 hours of film covering the invasion from every possible angle. The French resistance, German commanders, American paratroopers, the soldiers hitting the beaches. When it was finished, The Longest Day was the most expensive black and white film ever made. That record stood for 30 years until Schindler's List. The ambition is staggering. Most war movies pick one unit, one perspective, one slice of the battle. This one tried to capture the whole operation hour by hour across multiple fronts. They don't really make films like this anymore. The logistics alone would be impossible now. But in 1962, they went to Normandy with hundreds of people and recreated the biggest invasion in military history at the places where it actually happened. Sam Mendes grew up listening to his grandfather's stories about World War I. His grandfather had been a courier during the war, carrying messages across battlefields, and those stories stuck with Mendes for decades. When he finally made a movie about it, he wanted audiences to feel what his grandfather described, so he shot it to look like one continuous take. You follow two soldiers trying to deliver a message that could save 1,600 lives, and the camera never leaves them. Mendes brought in Roger Deakins to shoot it, and what they pulled off was technically insane. The camera tracks through trenches, across craters, into bombed-out buildings, all without a visible edit. It does something to you as a viewer. Because there are no cuts, you never get a break. Normal war movies give you breathing room. A scene ends, you reset, you prepare for the next thing. This one doesn't let you do that. You're trapped in the same hell the characters are trapped in. Eastwood decided to make two movies about the same battle. The Battle of Iwo Jima, 1945, one film from the American perspective, one from the Japanese perspective, both released the same year. It was an insane gamble, two massive war productions running simultaneously, telling opposite sides of the same story. The American one, Flags of Our Fathers, came out first. It did okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. Then the Japanese one came out a few months later. Letters from Iwo Jima is a masterpiece. Eastwood pulled from two books by people who were actually there. One was written by General Kurebayashi, who commanded the Japanese defense of Iwo Jima. The film follows soldiers who know they're going to lose, and that's the whole movie. Men facing certain defeat and wrestling with how to face it. Eastwood made a film where Japanese soldiers are scared young men stuck in an impossible situation, just like the Americans were. The cinematography is better than Flags of Our Fathers, the combat is more violent, and the emotional core actually lands. Oliver Stone went to Vietnam, saw combat, and came home with 2 Purple Hearts. When he got back, he looked at what Hollywood was making about the war and thought it was a disgrace. The Green Berets was flag-waving propaganda. Apocalypse Now was surreal art. Neither of them felt like what he'd actually experienced. So Stone started writing. He spent years on a script that tried to capture what it really felt like, and then, of course, nobody wanted to make it. The script sat around for a decade before it finally got produced. Charlie Sheen plays a young soldier at the Cambodian border, but the real story is the war inside his own unit. Tom Berenger plays Staff Sergeant Barnes, and it's terrifying. This is a man who murders villagers, brutalizes his own soldiers, and operates like combat has burned away every human instinct he ever had. Willem Dafoe plays the opposite, a sergeant who's trying to hold on to some kind of decency. Sheen is caught between them. It took him 10 years to get it made. When it finally came out, it became one of the most acclaimed war movies in history, and it came from a guy who'd been wounded twice fighting in the war he was depicting. That's why it feels different from everything else. October 1993, Mogadishu. American forces launch a raid to grab some lieutenants working for a local warlord. The operation is supposed to take an hour. 2 helicopters get shot down, the soldiers get pinned in hostile territory, and what was supposed to be a quick extraction turns into 15 hours of desperate fighting. 18 Americans die. The whole thing leads to the U.S. pulling out of Somalia. A journalist named Mark Bowden spent years interviewing the survivors, tracking down everyone who was there, piecing together what happened minute by minute. He published a book in 1999. Ridley Scott read it and decided to adapt it. Scott stripped away almost everything except the battle. There's barely any setup. You meet the soldiers, they go in, everything collapses, and then it's 2.5 hours of combat. No breaks. Just wave after wave of fighting as these guys try to survive and get out. What makes it work is Scott never loses the people. With a cast this big and action this relentless, most directors would let it turn into noise. Scott keeps finding the individual soldiers, a moment of fear here, exhaustion there, someone trying to hold it together. You always know whose story you're watching. George Patton was a problem. He helped win World War II, turned things around in North Africa, pushed through Sicily, saved the Allies during the Battle of the Bulge. He was one of the most effective generals America ever produced. He was also a nightmare, slapped soldiers suffering from combat trauma, gave speeches that horrified his superiors, openly despised the British forces he was supposed to be working with. He'd win a crucial battle and then destroy his own career with his mouth. How do you make a movie about someone like that? If you turn him into a hero, you're ignoring the cruelty. If you turn him into a villain, you're ignoring what he accomplished. Most biopics would pick a side. This one doesn't. You watch Patton win battles nobody else could win. You watch him sabotage his own career because he can't stop being himself. The movie never tells you how to feel about him. It just shows you who he was and trusts you to sit with the contradiction.